Florida State and LSU put together another exciting game between these two teams, and it was a game in which there were big implications. There were playoff implications on the line, and both teams started out pretty strong. And then obviously Florida State pulled away with it. But these are two teams that will be really good in 2023. LSU doesn't have too much to worry about. Obviously, they have some things to fix, but they're still going to be a solid team. This is a team that can definitely win double-digit games again in 2023. It's just they lost to a better team. Florida State took a big step with this win. Their production was phenomenal, and I think that we saw a lot from this team. Now, we won't say what that means going forward, just some observations of things that I've noticed in the past. Mike Norvell is a great coach, and I think that his ability to produce explosive offenses was the biggest difference in this game. And you saw his time at Memphis and what he was able to do. And I knew that he could be a really good coach at the Power Five level if he could figure out how to get his team to play the way that his Memphis teams did. And so far, we've seen one game of that, and it's really exciting. And his play calling made a big difference in this one. I think you look at the second half specifically, a 31-7 scoring difference between Florida State and LSU. And the 7 points was at the end. It really didn't matter. Mike Norvell did a great job of calling plays. Alex Atkins deserves a lot of credit as well. This is an offense that has a ton of talent, and we saw that on full display. But I think the biggest thing for Florida State was the fact that Jordan Travis figured out how to settle down. This was a guy who did not have a good first half. In fact, I think that he was a liability at times because you saw someone who was not making good decisions. You saw someone who, and there were two or three passes where you thought that maybe he was a freshman again. He throws a pick, another one that should have been intercepted deep in their own territory. There were not good decisions being made by Jordan Travis. And obviously, Mike Norvell sat him down and had a conversation with him about this is unacceptable. This has to change. And he took that to heart, obviously, because he really had a good second half, and he was a big difference in this game. For LSU, obviously, Jane Daniels, maybe not the game that he wanted. He was pretty fun to watch running the football. It's just that the passing game never really got going, and there were some drops on both sides of the ball where both teams just didn't get the playmakers to step up like they did. Special teams killed LSU. That was probably the biggest thing for LSU is that the special teams and fourth down decisions. There were two plays in the first half where LSU decided to go for it on fourth down instead of taking points, and they got stopped. Florida State's defense stepped up in a big way, and LSU maybe wants to go back and think of that, but also it's first game of the season, so maybe they were trying to see some things, see what their team's made of, and now they can work on that going forward. I thought that Mekhi Wingo was phenomenal. His statistics don't tell you that, but if you watch the film, this is someone who was making an impact. He was in the backfield of Florida State's offense most of the first half, and then obviously Florida State figures some things out how to negate his effectiveness, but he is definitely someone who had a big game for LSU. Harold Perkins was relatively quiet in terms of the broadcast, but you look at even one of Keon Coleman's touchdowns, he was seconds away, milliseconds really away from getting to Jordan Travis. He had a solid game in terms of getting to the football. I thought that he was still pretty good, and I think that he's going to have a good season. It's just they ran into an offense that was much better. So I think there's really good things for LSU. They have some things to figure out. Drops in the special teams woes, I think, really hurt them. And then the defense just didn't have an answer for Florida State's offense, and their own offense couldn't get going. So tip your hat to Florida State and especially their offense. The biggest thing to note outside of Jordan Travis's maturity and his ability to make adjustments for the second half was Keon Coleman. The Michigan State transfer was one of the most talked about transfers in the transfer portal this offseason, and he delivered 122 yards and 3 touchdowns, a phenomenal performance by him, and I think we can only expect more. We saw what this Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson combination could be, and it's terrifying. If Jordan Travis can continue playing at a high level, then this Florida State offense will be in good hands. So they looked really good offensively. The rushing attack wasn't as electric as maybe you'd want it to be, but they didn't necessarily have to. Still had some good runs. I think Trey Benson will be a name going forward that you still have to pay attention to, even though he didn't have the best game. But again, not really necessary when you're moving the ball as efficiently as you were through the air. And the two quarterbacks were obviously the spotlight coming into this game, and I think both of them had really good moments. I think both of them had moments where they are going to go back and film and figure out how to be better. How do they improve? And the numbers were really exciting. It's just that one of them obviously had a better second half. And Jaden Daniels, I think, is more limited as a passer, but I think that he in Mike Denbrock's system is the perfect fit. I think with what Denbrock did with Desmond Ritter applies a lot to Jaden Daniels. So that's something that will be good going forward. And you saw that last year. You'll see it again this year. And I think that Jaden Daniels will be just fine. I think he just needs to be able to figure out how to find a deep ball. I think you're going to see a lot of mesh. You're going to see a lot of different crossing routes that are shallow and shorter routes where he's going to dump it off and let his playmakers do the rest. And that's fine. But I think you have to find an intermediate to deep ball that will be beneficial to your offense that will open things up. And you saw at times he ran the football, and I'm surprised 64 yards was his total. I thought he had more with how well he was running it. But you have to find a passing game to open things up because the rushing attack left something to be desired, honestly. And Jane Daniels did his part, but I think at times he had to run because there was truly no time to throw. And then when you throw the ball and your guys drop passes, that obviously doesn't help either. Jordan Travis, like I said, the first half was weird. It was like this year, this week one has been full of experienced quarterbacks making decisions that make you scratch your head. And I'm not sure what's in the water and what these kids are doing, but Jordan Travis had those two or three throws where you're thinking, what are you doing? That just doesn't make any sense for a player of his caliber, someone who is a much better player than those throws indicate, and someone who needed obviously to have someone sit down with him and say, this is not going to work for us. You need to figure things out. And obviously he did. The second half was a different Jordan Travis. We saw a confident Jordan Travis. We saw a player who was making smart decisions. He was throwing some nice passes, very accurate passes, and he was making smarter choices with football. And then you let the play calling take over from there and just let Jordan Travis wheel and deal. That was just really fun to watch. When you're talking about this game, there were so many players that you could have highlighted, and obviously the quarterbacks were two of them. Keon Coleman, we talked about already, phenomenal start for him. Johnny Wilson had some drops. Again, drops were something that I think this both offenses need to figure out. Johnny Wilson, in terms of his draft stock, has to get that figured out because some of his drops were really bad. He was wide open, or they were short passes that should be caught easily. These are routine catches he was dropping. So that's one nitpicking thing going forward that you will have to figure that out because if you want to win a national championship, things like that cannot happen. Same thing for LSU. They are not out of the national championship race. It will be much more difficult with one loss, but you have to figure out this special teams thing because this is the exact same thing that happened last year. It almost felt like deja vu because punt return was a struggle. I don't know what you need to do to figure that out, but you can't keep doing that. So there's plenty of things to work on, but I also think that there are plenty of areas where you can highlight. Jared Verse didn't have the best game statistically, but he was a force in this game. I think that he had some plays where you can see the first round potential. You can see why he's going to be in the NFL. That was huge. And this is a Florida State defense that was swarming at times. That was almost suffocating LSU's offense. And that was also a big part of this second half. They did give us some big plays. They also made some big plays as well. First half specifically, we talked about those two fourth down plays that LSU had. That was Florida State basically stepping up in a big way. And this is a defense that will need to do that again. And if you can combine a really good defense, because Adam Fuller's defense is aggressive, they are going to try to make as many plays as possible. They were going to be as aggressive as possible, send a ton of pressure. And that's no different than his time at Memphis. This is someone who wants to be aggressive. He wants his players to attack, and it worked out well. Now, there will be times where they get gashed, and we saw some of that tonight. But if you can continue to attack and attack and attack, eventually your opponent will wear down, and that opens things up for you in terms of your defense and then gets back the ball to your offense who clearly has no problem scoring points. And this was a tremendous performance for Florida State, a statement game to start the year. And LSU obviously is back to the drawing board, but both teams still have a lot to be excited about going forward. It's just that one team starts 1-0 and the other one has to figure out how to not lose another game.